Welcome.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Friday group. It's nice to have you with us, and welcome live streamers. It seems like we have a summer crowd today. There's my radio show where I now have a co-host. Her name is Amy Torres, and she's just an amazing sister, brother, I was going to say, but she's not a guy. She and I interview Carol Howe, who was a good friend of Bill Thetford many years ago, and she is now 78 years old, and she, in my mind, she's one of the greatest teachers around today. She is the most in-depth, knowledgeable about the Course in Miracles, and she really makes it practical. And Amy and I had a chance to interview her last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, live. And today's broadcast at Unity FM Radio is that interview with Amy and I and Carol. And some of the things that Carol offers in this telecast will actually have you look at things completely different. She has some insights that are just simple little tools of awareness, simple little tools of noticing that will change your experience for all time. So if you have a chance to either rewatch the video by going to Unity FM, you can replay, no, Unity FM, you can replay today's audio. And the replay of the video, you would probably have to go to my Facebook wall and click on it, and you can register for a replay of that live interview, which was with audio and video. It was really a great time for us. And then also Lisa says, I haven't heard her broadcast, but she says today is one of her all-time best monologue radio shows. And, of course, she's always saying, well, that was the best one, that was the best one, that was the best one. They're all great. But she is describing this to be something that really inspired her. So if you have a chance to watch her at 3 o'clock today, you can also do that. And then 2 more announcements, because these are time sensitive. June 8th, Lisa will be interviewing live on a webinar, and it's free for 1 hour. She's going to interview Rupert Spira, and he, in my opinion, is the world's most insightful non-dual teacher. He really is. He's been studying all the traditions for over 30 years. He doesn't know A Course in Miracles that well. He doesn't read it, but when he reads a statement out of A Course in Miracles, he totally knows exactly where it's coming from. He can recite the other side of the truth. There's this side of the truth, and then there's this other side of the truth, the non-dual version of it, the Advaita Vedanta, or the Sufi, or one of the great masters. He's been to India and studied many of the different traditions over in India, and he's really quite versed in non-duality, and he has become my favorite. I'm going to see Rupert for 1 week. Actually, Lisa's going also. We're going to see Rupert for a 1 week retreat in New York. And so we'll be doing that. But and then the other thing is that, let's see, what was the other? Oh, on June 11th, we have for you guys that are in LIP, we have a 2-hour webinar that is going to be live. So you'll have to get a registration for that, but you can also find that on the Facebook page for Living in Purpose. And I think that's all the announcements. If you guys have any announcements. Otherwise, we're going to take this time for greeting. Namaste. We're going to greet our friends. We have someone new that's with us today, Susan. And you guys take a moment to greet each other, and then we'll be back, and I'll introduce John Wernsdorfer. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Well, I'm really excited that we're going to get to hear from our brother John Wernsdorfer in a moment. And John has been, like I said a minute ago, we have the reading. Oh, yeah. Before I introduce John, thank you, Technical Director Bonnie Kimball. Before I introduce John, I'm going to ask Arthur Gay to come up and give our reading. It's not from the Cafe Gratitude. I was just inspired to open up the course, and he's going to read from Workbook Lesson 200.
Thanks, Bill. Hi, I'm Arthur. Lesson 200. There is no peace except the peace of God. Seek no further. You will not find peace except the peace of God. Accept this fact and save yourself the agony of yet more bitter disappointments, bleak despair, and a sense of icy hopelessness and doubt. Seek you no further. There is nothing else for you to find except the peace of God, unless you seek for misery and pain. Amen.
Thank you, Arthur. My name is Arthur. He's from New England, you guys. He's from New England. He's that's the thing, you know. That's the way you say Arthur. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Well, it gives me great joy to introduce a brother. I was talking about John. I met John about 4 years ago here at Unity on the River. We were both in the same class. It was the art and practice of knowing and nothing against you. And it was the first time that I noticed John, and we were both just sort of getting our feet wet with some of these unity principles and unity ideas. And the reason that I loved this class was I was drawn to it because it was very similar to the principles of A Course in Miracles. The art and practice of knowing and nothing against you. In other words, I am not a victim of the world I see. And I don't know if it's a required course, but they were talking about making it a required course for Unity board members, and maybe even making it Unity members, a required course, like they have the basics, the Unity basics, and a few things like a tithing class. You have to go to a few different things to be a Unity member here. But they were talking about that being a required class. I really think it would be good if they did, because it's so in sync with the principles of A Course in Miracles. But anyway, that's where I met John, and then John just sort of, he took off and became a board member for several years, and and then he started showing up here about 6 months ago. And I love this guy. He is just on fire for the truth, but in the very gentle, very present way. And I want to ask all of us to please give a warm welcome to John Wernsdorfer. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Bill. Awesome. Yes.
All right. Got me all right? So let's start with miracles. Means that we need to be present to get good miracles. Hopefully I can inspire some. That would be nice. So to do that, let's first go into a little prayer and some meditation to find our heart centered. So close your eyes, get comfortable if you like, and just notice where you're at, what you brought in. Let it go. Allow it. Breathe. Thank you, God, for bringing us all here together as one to enjoy each other's presence and our own presence. Just sit with that for a minute. Okay, so pull yourself back when you're ready. All right, so let me start. What I'm going to talk about is forgiveness. Which is, in my mind, the core of the course. And in forgiveness, the first thing I wanted to do was just define it based on 3 different principles. So we'll start with the Bible, because a lot of people go right to the Bible. And the Bible definition says, forgiveness is the act of pardoning an offender. In the Bible, the Greek word translated forgiveness literally means to let go, as when a person does not demand payment for a debt. And then it goes on and says, we forgive others when we let go of resentment and give up any claim to be compensated for the hurt or loss we have suffered. The Bible teaches that unselfish love is the basis for true forgiveness, since love does not keep account of the injury. And then Webster's has some similarities to it, but a significant difference, I thought, is defined offense, annoyance, or resentment brought about by a, quote, perceived insult to or disregard for oneself or one's standard of principles. And you notice that, it uses a synonym to pardon an offense. And you notice that Webster's does not pardon the offense, only the offender. I said offense, but it says pardon the offender. Okay, so that I thought was significant. And then the course, I love this new book because it has definitions in the back you can look up. So on page, 15 something, 1935, it defines forgiveness. Letting go of our false perception that another sinned against us and deserves our anger, and thereby releasing that person from the guilt we had laid upon her. Forgiveness, then, is the recognition that there is nothing to forgive. This contrasts with the conventional understanding of forgiveness, in which we retain the perception that another sinned against us and deserves our anger, yet then try to let go of the anger that is part of that perception. Forgiveness is the central theme which runs through salvation. The Course teaches that through forgiving our brothers, we come to forgive ourselves. So that kind of leads into my story. Forgiving ourselves. I think we all probably have some recognition of what it's like to forgive ourselves, but if not, then you probably will. So let's see. So I think the best way I could figure to go into this was just to kind of tell some of my story, tell a little bit of my background. The difference between guilt and shame, if everybody doesn't understand that, is guilt is I feel like I've done something wrong, where shame is I feel like I am wrong, inherently just a wrong person. So my forgiveness story is really centered around my father. Surprise, right? A lot of men, right, connect with forgiveness and their father. I grew up in a house of 7, 5 kids, and my father was a chief, a very accomplished man, and demanded a lot. And I followed him around like a shadow. I learned everything I could from him. But I also was scared to death of him, literally. And I didn't come to terms with that until I was probably about 45, when my cousin started telling stories that I didn't understand because I was in them. And so what I realized was that I had these chunks of memory loss that explained a lot of things. And so to go back, I pretty much followed him around. That was what I did. And with a lot of encouragement from my mother, who pretty much said, you can do anything, you just got to set your mind to it. So a lot happened as a child, but it kind of culminated at about 14. I decided that I didn't want to follow this guy around anymore, that I was scared to death of, and got really rebellious and just did a lot of things that landed me in a lot of trouble. And through that, he invited me to leave. So right at about 15, I decided that I would go take care of myself, which I did. Within about 10 minutes after he invited me to leave. And I moved out. I was living in Alaska, and decided that I could do this. I could go get a job and go to high school and take care of myself and all of that. So what I didn't realize was how much I didn't know, as most 15-year-olds don't. And in that process, did a lot of things because I thought I knew how to do them. So I tried everything I could to get some money, to buy food, to buy a place to live, and all that. I tried selling drugs, but I was pretty emotionally hurt. So that didn't go well together because I also tried them all, which really wasn't consistent with making a living at it. So fortunately, I've done a number of addictive things and saw what I was doing and decided that wasn't a good path and I would change it. And I know a lot of friends who didn't have that insight, but I think I was very fortunate to see that. So I tried many of those paths. I ended up learning how to make a living playing pool. So I was the kid that hung out at the pool hall where there were hookers and pimps and drug dealers and everything you could imagine in this area. And it was kind of an interesting experience to learn to trust people that you otherwise wouldn't even get near. And also to learn that not everybody that offered help really wanted to help. There were times when I would be hungry, and the bars there used to close for 2 hours. So one of the bartenders used to invite me and another friend in, and they would feed us. And then we would fall asleep at the bar, and he'd kick us out before they opened. So there are some people you just don't expect that really are there to lend a hand and help and so forth. But through this whole process, getting to the way this works out, just a second. I want to kind of stay with my notes. Yeah, so in the middle of it, I tried to stay on a fairly good course if I could figure out how to get educated, to get my own place to live, to get a car, and all these things, which didn't work out so well. I ended up going to 4 high schools for 2 years by making up addresses and going and telling them that I lived down the street, and so I would enroll, and of course they want your parents' signatures, and so I would hold them off, and eventually they'd be turned on to what's going on, and they wouldn't allow me back in. So I'd go to another high school and do the same thing. So I did this for a couple of years. It was a little tough, but I slowly kind of made it through. And the high schools weren't really geared up back then to, we're talking, I don't know, 76, 78, somewhere in there, to accommodate that kind of a person. So, and I ended up living with a friend who was also on his own since he was very young, and that helped a lot because he helped me figure things out. But what I was also carrying around, which was the whole point with all that, was this immense amount of anger and literally just pissed off. And I'm only recently getting in touch with why that was. I was basically pissed off that I deserved love. I deserved to be supported. And I felt like I wasn't. And so not recognizing that, not understanding how to forgive myself, to forgive others, to see all that, instead it just played out as everybody else was against me. And so that's how I lived, was everybody was against me, which just kind of stuffs it all a little bit deeper. So eventually I joined the service because I figured they offer schooling, place to live, food, why not? So escaping from what I would say was one tyrant and went into a whole group of them was, right, par for the course, right? I mean, literally, like, it was right there, right? Asking me to do it and say, okay, here, you're going to deal with this now. And so I did, and it was amazing. I made it through boot camp because I had done extra duties and what they call short tours, and I got in fights, and just in boot camp, and I felt like, why are they singling me out always? And then I finally made it onto a ship, and it got worse. So now I ended up restricted to the ship, and I was really just this kid. One time the captain called me to his office, which was unusual, and literally grabbed me. So I was 17, I think, by then. I was 17, yeah. And he grabbed me and picked me right up, threw me against a wall, and started screaming at me, which didn't have any effect except make me relax because I had already recognized that kind of action, and that wasn't going to do it. So I just said, all right, I don't know what that was about. That didn't make any sense, but so I moved on. So this kind of went on. Eventually I got out, got married, had kids, which is a little scary to think that I was in that kind of state of mind, and now I've got a family, and thought the only thing that I can do about this was to work a lot. So I worked 2 to 3 jobs pretty steadily, which is got its own bit of guilt and regret, having 3 kids and working all the time. And that pretty much kind of lasted about 16 years. And I think probably near the end of that was when I started to realize what forgiveness was. Because when that broke up, I completely put this all on her. She caused all this. And it took me about 4 years before I realized that I had created this situation. And so I basically met with her, and as the Course would say, I forgave her and released her from that perceived obligation to take on this role of being the cause of all my shit. But it was a huge step to go, oh, so I'm creating this perception. This is me doing this. And so you would think, okay, well, that's good. So let's get better at this. No, I dropped right back into it, got remarried, and did it all over again. No kids this time. And I thought, maybe she wasn't the right one for me, right? So yeah, well, no, I think she was probably perfect for me, and I got that now, but I didn't get it then. And so the next perfect person for me was 16 years younger. So that was a good idea, right? No, that was a really bad idea. Right? So I tried that, and her and I would both agree that was a bad idea. And so, and she's got her life now and her children, and so that's great. That lasted about 6 years, I think. And so I've gone through these relationships, and they started to take on this pattern, and being really into math and patterns and an engineer by background, I could see that the pattern common denominator was me looking through. So it was time to go, okay, let's try reversing that and look back in and see what's going on. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? So it changed drastically. Recently I read a book by Susan Piver, who talks about heartbreak. And it's really interesting how she explains that heartbreak's a golden opportunity to look within and really just appreciate that journey of being in heartbreak. And it was really interesting to turn that around and go, oh yeah, absolutely. There's all kinds of opportunity that just comes up with that. So I really appreciated that book, and looking back, I can see how it happened just exactly the way she described. It was just opportunity after opportunity. So after the second marriage, I really started to turn within and realized that I needed to look at my own shit and forgive it. And I wasn't into the Course yet, so I didn't really understand forgiveness the way I understand it now. So we'll move ahead a little bit more. And so I went through another relationship, much different, way more loving. It was an eye-opener to be with somebody who came from a really big, loving family that really didn't carry around a lot of that stuff that I did. I would say she probably got tired of watching me carry it around and not deal with it. Just in a nutshell, that would probably be about the way it ended. And although I was trying to, it's a process. So, which right there coincided with that conversation with my cousin, who started telling me these stories about things that happen. And they involved a lot of physical abuse. It wasn't just me, it was me and my brother, but it made me connect some dots and realize, oh, okay, so I'm just like this guy pissed off and going into a relationship looking for solutions that I think she's going to provide me with. And I need to figure out how to deal with them myself. And so I started going to therapy, basically, because I didn't understand how to deal with this. It really started when right at that same time, my father called me, and I had hardly any connection with him, but he called me and he had broke his hip. He was living alone, broke his hip. He was 70-something. He had this dark dream and tried to attack a ghost and landed on a table and broke his hip, and wanted me to take care of him. So, of course, I said, sure. Not realizing my past, and then it all started to come in, and every time I would go visit him, that night I would have these dreams that would bring it up. And they weren't nice dreams. They were more about me expressing my anger on him, which didn't make any sense. But after connecting all the dots, it started to come together. And then that relationship pretty much broke off pretty quick. He really didn't have much comfort having me around, and I didn't really understand what was going on. So we didn't really hit it off too well. But he, after he got over his hip, he moved on, and so we'll leave it at that. But so then, where was I? So then, so I was in another relationship. That relationship pretty much brought me to Unity. She was a Unity person, and that was quite an awakening as well. I remember listening to Jackie Woodside the first time I came here talk about rerouting neural paths, and how not to reroute too many at once. And I went, oh, I can understand that. Because at that point I had gotten laid off, moved out of my house, finished a relationship, was in the middle of heartbreak, moved in with somebody else, moved an hour and a half away. Totally. My kids were not talking to me anymore, and I didn't understand that. And I was making no money, but it all seemed like the right way to go, which was really weird. So I was just following it, going, what the hell's going on? I found myself living in this apartment that wasn't mine with a bag of stuff, and the lights would get turned off occasionally, and I had no gas for my car, but I was just kind of trucking through it, not really understanding, but going to therapy, and she was helping me connect the dots. And there was a point where she started to have me look at myself and understand why I was doing the things I was doing as a kid, and working through a little bit of it. And that's, to me, where the forgiveness is really the big player, is how to change your perception. I think up until then, I saw myself as this kind of unworthy, pissed off, rebellious, really clumsy, which is a whole nother story, insecure. There's a whole list, and it played out in all sorts of ways. I was way overweight. I was just a lot of things. Had trouble being around a lot of people. And so coming here helped a lot, because I started to listen to this idea of oneness, and started touching on the Course in Miracles, just kind of randomly reading some things, and read a few great books. I think one of them was from, what's the guy that wrote, was it The Shack? Right? Yeah. And started to actually come in touch with God as everything. And that kind of made me a little just easier in my own skin, to realize that I'm not alone, that I'm not the only one doing this, and nor are any of us, right? So, and effectively taking classes, like Bill was talking about, that was a huge step, taking that class, and I still use that workbook, Nothing and No One Against Us, which is all about forgiveness and perception. Basically, you find a trigger, and you go into your past, and you identify where it was, and you, the way I like to do it is I become the angel on the little John, and the angel on effectively my father, and re-advise and have conversations with the two and change the situation, and then identify how that affects various important steps up through my life, and how they might have been different had that situation been different. And like Bill said, that's it's very much like the Course. There was a point somewhere in there that I credit a good friend of mine, and I was telling him a little bit about my past, and he just kind of said, that's just a story, right? and we were out having a good time, couple beers, playing pool, and it just stuck me right in the chair. And I really decided, wow, yeah, it is just a story. It was kind of interesting. So let me see, where are we going with this next? Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so let's see. Sorry. Give me a second. Oh, yeah. In the definitions, I thought there was a great point in there that I thought is in the Bible's verse. It brings up suffering, which I thought was interesting, because suffering, as I see it as a choice that we decide to, in my mind, not forgive ourselves and just continually self-loathe or self-pay for what we think we're supposed to pay for. I think suffering is part of retelling the story because you feel it over and over again. But I think also telling the story, and Bill touched on this the last session here, it's an important fact to tell the story, I think, or an important point to tell the story if your perception is now in a teaching way, in a way to use it effectively for yourself or for someone else, and just identify with your story as how it makes you who you are in a stronger way, better way, more effective way. Yeah. So just ignoring the story isn't quite the answer. And I think there's some suffering in just telling the story so that you can keep being in it. All right, let's see. What's next? Oh, so what's really interesting now, I do therapy every week because I love it. It's awesome yeah, right? So, I mean, what's interesting is we find these things that are uncomfortable, annoying, whatever, maybe way deeper than that. And what's under them is always some gift of, for me recently I started singing and playing the piano and writing songs and doing all of it. And I've never done any of this stuff before, but it's all coming together really fast. And it's like, wow. And the important aspect of that is that it's being driven by the 6-year-old in me. The 6-year-old's really driving that bus, and I'm standing back going, yeah, let's go. Go for it. Fast as you want, whatever you want to do, let's just do it. And I make sure I schedule that time in before work, and it's all amazing. And I think that, I'm pretty confident that when we stuff away these painful things and we don't forgive them and we don't see the perception of what they are, we can perceive them as guilt and shame and lots of stuff, which I still have those. But or you can change your perception on it, and not just change it, but really understand, like, why did I go out and chose to sell drugs, right? To think of it now is like, what a horrific thing to do. What was I thinking, right? And then to take them and do it, it just blows my mind. But it wasn't, I was 15, and I was trying to figure out how to eat. And that was my focus, survival. So under that, and rather than seeing myself as this horrific person that did this, I need to really identify with the perception that, forgive that thought and move on to what you were doing and how it worked and how it helped you survive and so forth. So that kind of leads me into what you've probably all heard is the Ho'oponopono, which I really like. It applies to almost any situation, I think, in terms of forgiveness. And so in that, I would say, I'm sorry for my perception. Please forgive me for making up this fantasy. I love you, God, and all beings that are unique expressions of God. Thank you for the opportunity to forgive. And then I kind of wrote my own news story. So let me just read it here and make sure I got it all. So one of the things that I think is kind of profound too is when I look at every birthday I have, I really sit for a little while and honor my mother, who so I was born in 1961, and as this is primarily women in here, but you probably know that in 1961 all the doctors were men. And women didn't know anything, perception. And so the doctors had told my mother that she wasn't going to have a baby right then. And she insisted that she was. And so I was born in the hallway without a doctor. So which I think is it's humorous in that I can't imagine a group of well-educated men not realizing that this person that's already had 4 kids knows that she knows what she's doing. And maybe you might want to listen to her. But they chose not to. And so, and then also to think she was 27. She had 4 kids. Her husband was gone most of the time on submarines, unable to get in touch with them. And how fearful that must have been. Just imagining going through that, and I kind of have to honor that, and then I put a little forgiveness in myself on that, and think so. I was kind of brought right into this situation with all this fear and bad perception, and and yet still loved and taken care of, at least as much as I could have been, or they knew how. So what I wrote was, I was brought into this world suddenly and to be a teacher of God. I have been dealt great challenges to make of it with my own free will. I have been shown tools of integrity, love, strength to endure, compassion to triumph, over perceived wrongs, and to feel emotional and physical pain that might have felt hopeless but never was. I was brought to my knees more than once to pray and to be told you can do whatever you set your mind to. I think in the hold on. Okay, yeah. I also wanted to say, let's see. All of it leads to forgiveness. When we forgive our brothers, we care all one, and we effectively are forgiven ourselves, thus releasing the debt. I think that's out of one of the references in Course in Miracles. Let's see. I think that's it. I want to add, though, too, I love listening to Eckhart Tolle, and one of the things Eckhart Tolle always says is, or something in this light, is that my words are going to be inherently wrong because they're part of the physical world and the ego is there. And I also like how he describes that when you think of the limited number of sounds our voice can make, and have the limited number of words that are in our vocabulary, how could we possibly explain all that I just went through, or forgiveness, or love, or any of these things? We can only explain them in terms of what we think we understand. So, there's a lot of forgiveness in that. And I think I want to just open it up now. Does anybody have anything they want to, how much time where are we at?
Got 15, 20 minutes left.
All right, yeah. Plenty of time. All right. Yes, Bill.
I loved your story. It's a mirror of my own. And I'm sitting here going, how can his story be just like mine? Really? At the same age?
Yeah.
I didn't have, getting beat up, leaving at 14, all of those things. And I'm sitting here going, oh my God, here's my mirror of perception. Perception is a mirror, not a fact. And you're the first one that I've met that has very similar. I didn't go in the Navy, but I did all the other stuff in your story. And I'm sitting here just, putting all this in the light, putting it on the altar, because you're just an image in my mind talking about my story. Yeah. And I love, that I love we asked for the fast track. We asked for the elevator to enlightenment, or we wouldn't have got the experience that we asked for.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful to see you, my brother, on this side of the story. And,
Me too.
the 6-year-old, and Laura just says, I'm 5. I'm 5 too. And I'm wanting to play the guitar. I'm actually, so I just love the freshness and the humor of the universe, of giving us the exchange, giving us the we can exchange this for the true experience that our Father wants us to have, experiencing our inheritance, which is joy and peace and love, and all the things that you thought that you were missing, or all the things that I thought I was missing. I was very angry, just like you were, and it's just awesome to have this similar experience of gratitude now. And being on this side of the equation, where the story is a story about truth. The story is a story about the prodigal son who was lost, but now he's found. And I so appreciate your expression today, and being able to stand up here and share this from a place of non-victim and total enlightenment, and really the experience of heaven on earth, and really knowing we're on the same path. And many of us here can probably say the same thing, and have different parts of the story that's their story also. And I'm just grateful that we're in this place of awareness, so that we can take a story like that and see how the character of God, or the love of God, really shines right through it, so that now you're, whatever age you are, you're now sharing the truth of awakening through that lens that's now the lens of forgiveness. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, it's awesome.
John, that was awesome. So proud of you. And I can relate too, on a different level, but same thing, got beaten, came into this world in massive dysfunction, same thing as pretty much everybody in here. That's why I keep going to AA, because I hear everybody's story and I can always relate. And it's like, wow, click, 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 click. I always get to see my mirrors. I loved how you said, if you're telling the story, to tell on yourself, to make it a point, this is how you're changing from this story, or this is what it's taught you. Again, in AA, it's called the 4th step. A thorough 4th step, it's called one and done. Do it, shut it, and learn from it. And the only time I will really should be telling my story again is like if I'm talking to a sponsee or I'm talking to someone from the podium or wherever, or even up here, like you're doing that one time, is to say this, and this has happened, but not sharing the same thing, but just saying these situations. Now I know who you are. I didn't know who you were before, right? Because you don't. And when someone speaks at a meeting, I say, I didn't know who you were till you spoke from the podium. But then to telling yourself, you know, me and her say it all the time. It's called 10-step on steroids. You know, if you're going to tell a story right behind it, we go, wow, see, want to know what I created today? Want to know what I just did? And it might be something good, and then it might be something bad. And it's nice to do that with what we call them 10-step buddies or a friend that is on this spiritual path, because they'll help you turn it right around. Right. Like, oh, we're only supposed to be here. We already did this morning on the way here. Oh, I said, my whole thing is I just want to be happy, peaceful, and loving. And anything that isn't that, I don't really want any part of it. You know? And she's like, yeah, that's it. And when you're in a place, you can't come to that place because, like you said, you keep grabbing a human or grabbing something else. I love that. That's awesome because I can relate to that. There is no one. There is no one for you. There is no one person that's going to make you okay. The minute you think it is, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So that was perfect that you can't possibly have anything outside of you that's going to make you okay, because the one thing I did learn from this Course in Miracles and AA and other spiritual things I do, because I do everything to stay connected, like you said, Eckhart Tolle, you know, Byron Katie, you know, Abraham Hicks, the one thing, they all come together into one thing. They all say the same thing. And the one thing I've learned from all of it is that there's nothing outside of me that's going to make it okay, because the ego will just put something on a platter in front of me. Let's call it a husband or a boyfriend or a job or a baby or your children. And then it will pull the rug out from underneath you to try anything. It will just pull the rug out from underneath you and go, hey, how you making out now? Yeah. How's God doing for you now? How's God doing for you now? And that's when the rubber, in AA, they say that's when the rubber hits the road. Yeah. This is when, especially if it's one of your children, you know, and it's something I'm going through now, because the story has come back up again in front of me, and I have to go, oh, hell no. This is where the rubber hits the road, and I've already put you into the hands of God, so play it again if you want, but I won't be watching that movie. And I shall not be talking about that movie anymore. That boundary has already been set. For me, if someone continues to harm, or if I continue to keep seeing the same thing, I have choices. The choice is to forgive them, forgive myself, forgive everything I'm seeing, the whole pono. Sorry I made you an actor. You know, really sorry. Forgive me. But that doesn't mean I have to step into it with them anymore. It means I have to step away from it sometimes and go, you know what? You're all good to play this movie. You're a child of God, and that's your movie. But that's not my movie. So thank you so much, John. That's awesome.
I could add, too, it's interesting. What took me 4 or 5 years to go through forgiveness with my first wife. More recently, I've separated, broken up with my girlfriend, and it's interesting because I feel that same kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, anger? Yeah, and so that's when I go, we need to talk. Let's talk about it, because I want to forgive you, and I want to do it right now. And it's awesome. And it happens, and she gets it, and we go through it, and it's done.
One and done.
Yeah. It's a much different life that way. It's more beautiful. It's more peaceful. There's nobody out there that did anything wrong. I love I think she was the one that coined, or what I heard was everybody's a unique expression of God, and no doubt. Yeah.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for showing me these things.
Kelly's got her hand up.
Great job. I loved everything that you said. One of the things that just want to kind of add on to, and we've been studying a lot in here with Lisa and just those of us reading on our own a lot of David Hawkins's material, the healing and recovery, and particularly the map of consciousness, where the different levels of consciousness that we're at that cause us to see God in a particular way and see ourselves and other people and our circumstances in a particular way. And so as I was listening to you, I was just really struck by your describing your journey of your levels of consciousness raising and raising and raising and raising, and going from the place of shame to the place of guilt to the place of anger to the place of courage. And then at the level of courage, it starts going up as opposed to being in that negative, in the dark and in the abyss and all of that, and how you've just continued and that finding that courage to look at what was going on, finding courage to forgive, finding courage to go to therapy, and just continuing that so that you're just at a very high level of consciousness right now. And so it's a great testimony to that philosophy, and it's just a great teaching. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, Maggie wants the mic. Thank you.
Maggie.
Yeah, John, thank you.
Yes, you want.
It's so nice. I've heard you speak a little bit here, during the meeting, and I knew I wanted to hear you today. And I'm grateful that you're here and we're all here. It's nice when someone can get up and tell the story, and like you say, and admit where they were and what was going on. Where I related with your story was when you were doing the childhood and you had the missing pieces. My daughter will say that now, growing up, and she'll say, well, Mom, what was it like when I was 5, and what was it like when I was 3? And, I came out of craziness with my mother and then went into a marriage that was really dysfunctional. I don't remember. And I didn't have to drink, and I didn't have to pick up a drug. I just was so shut down, in the middle of the whole thing, that I don't have a memory. I can't tell her what was going on. It's amazing, because to survive, that was the mechanism.
Yes.
The mechanism was, okay, to survive this or to survive the childhood, you had to shut off.
And I think that's the hook to the forgiveness.
Right, right. And I know, like you say, I've done work after work after work after work during the years. And now it's like you say, it's easy. It's amazing. When I'm uncomfortable or something's going on at the moment, I don't have to stay anymore. I don't have to do it anymore. And that's just for the moment. Doesn't mean the next moment I can't, I'm just so aware and I'm so sensitive now that before I never knew. I had no idea that this wasn't appropriate for me, or this jerk I was dating was being abusive. As you say, I didn't know. And that is the child. And when you're coming back now and you're playing the instrument, you're allowing the child to grow and to expand, and now you can let the child out.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, is to kind of open the drawer and let him climb out.
And it's okay
Be
for
part of
him
me.
to come out now, because he has the father as this father, but he has you as the father.
Well, if not, then subconsciously he was coming out and taking control of the bus in places where it probably wasn't a good idea.
Before, yes. That's what happened. Yes. Well, you thought, we don't, and it's like you say, it's easy to understand when you can look at the story, but it's hard for a lot of people to look at the story. So I give you a lot of credit.
I think it's important to really understand that there's no jerk. There's no asshole, because there's judgment on that. These are your saviors, and what I'm learning, really, even a higher understanding of this verse. I mean, the description of forgiveness in the Course is that forgiveness recognizes that what I thought happened or what my brother did never happened. So it never occurred. So that's the highest level of understanding forgiveness. And then also, as I even look at even the term petty tyrant, that's also still calling that a something, and it's really a vehicle. The jerk is not really a jerk. It's a silver platter for my awakening. It's a silver platter for me to see love instead of fear. And
You only need to choose to see it that way.
yes, yes, yeah. Thank you for expressing it the way you did today. It was really beautiful. Anybody else? Linda?
My girlfriend asked me this week, and she said, "Do you ever hold people accountable, for what they did?" So I think in my life, I haven't. I've walked away, and then I've come to why not? Or like the court does it, right? Or something like, accountable. I don't even know. I'm just bringing it up. Is it good to do, or just it's not good to do?
Well,
It's
by
more
the
spiritual not
by
to.
the definition, I think it says. By definition, it the way I understand the way it reads, I know there's a hair in there, is you can hold people accountable, but you don't necessarily. Let me read it rather than try to quote it. But basically, it's not. You don't want to forget what they did necessarily, but you don't want to hold them. You want to pardon pardon the person, not the action.
Exactly. Don't jump at the
Right? It's not good for someone to hurt you, but understand, that they are a person and they're probably doing something that they shouldn't otherwise be doing, and somewhere in them is their own forgiveness on that. But do you still let them hurt you? No, absolutely not.
That's
Yeah,
forgiveness. That's a version. That's the world's version of forgiveness.
We need
Yes.
response here.
Yeah, so there's a deeper understanding in there that's a little bit hard to articulate, but there's a layer of perception in that needs some work.
A layer of perception needs work.
Yeah, that's probably the safest way to put it for me, because otherwise I would be really talking out my ass.
So John, thank you for describing your awakening, and I could really identify with it because I wasn't able to be present before I awakened, and I was introduced to the Course about 3 years ago after doing a lot of work that I got to a point where I knew that I had been asleep for a long, long time. And the thing that really struck me is in the last 3 years I've seen the use of Ho'oponopono. And I had a chance to live in Hawaii a few times, and I've gotten to know some Hawaiian people, and I learned a lot about the culture. And Ho'oponopono is it's like this trans-dimensional philosophy that I was taught while I was there that helped me awaken. And it wasn't just forgiveness. It was, and it's like we described here, it's forgiveness and atonement. It's restitution. It's recognizing the Christ self in others, in our thought system. Ho'oponopono was recognizing truth, forgiving it in others, and then living it through ourselves without doing further harm. So it's this forgiveness and atonement. It's the same as seeing the Christ in everything and everyone. And I couldn't do that until I had clarity from a point which to start that process. And it is mind training every day. Because if I'm thinking, I'm in peril. But thank you.
Oh.
Yes, forgiveness. Like I've been doing the petty tyrant thing for a couple weeks. And I don't have a petty tyrant, not unless I make them up. So my forgiveness is of my thought of making them up. Because no one can harm me, not unless I think they can harm me. So that's my forgiveness of the thought that they can harm me.
Yeah, good one, Arthur. Thank you. Yeah,
Good.
awesome.
All right.
Good.
I'm not aware how to wrap it up.
So I think that concludes our discussion for today. And if we'll,
All right, so
if
we're
we
done.
everyone will rise
Let's
and-
get a circle, and
yeah,
do you want me to pray us out?
sharing. Yes,
Yeah?
yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, live streamers.
Thank you.
Wasn't he awesome, you guys?
Awesome.
Okay, so let's close the circle. Yeah, everyone give John a warm gratitude.
Thank you.
Live streamers, thank you for joining with us today. We're going to finish closing the circle, and then, John, would you close us in prayer?
I will. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so take a deep breath and get centered, however you'd like to, eyes open, closed, whatever. I like to pray with my eyes open because I like to get used to seeing the world as I'm praying. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody, for opening your hearts, being here as God, representing all of us as one. Accepting my presence and offering your own. And so it is.
And so it is. Amen. And I'll bless the tithes and the offerings. And we have the love box in the back for you guys that would like to support the space here. And live streamers, you can go to the Teachers of God website. There's a donate button. And divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. Thank you, live streamers. Thank you, everyone. We love you. Bye-bye.